course, codes have been around a long time. Babylonians, it's a code, 1700 odd BC. If a builder builds a house for someone and does not construct it properly, and this house which he builds collapses and kills its owner, then that builder shall be put to death. Straightforward, right? There's no gray area, easy to deal with, understand the code. If the building collapses and ruins goods, then the builder shall make compensation for all that has been ruined. And inasmuch as he did not properly construct this house which he built, and it fell, then he shall re-erect the house from his own means. And he's probably looking at that and going, wow, I'm glad it didn't land on Bob. You know? So he's going to have to take it out of his own profit and revenue stream. Okay, that's a code. But what about it building energy codes? Why are they here? Well, part of it drives back to that first slide, if you will. The issue of shortages. For transportation and liquid fuels, depending upon limited natural resources that come from some of the most politically unstable parts of the world. It's a challenging endeavor. It's an expensive endeavor for us, too. Gosh, since about 1973, we've spent about $3.2 trillion in 2005 chain dollars importing fuel oil for gasoline and such. Now, could we have done a little better if the CAFE standards were a little bit more stringent? Remember, where do you set the wall? Is it too easy? Is it too difficult? Gosh, there was years where we didn't improve the CAFE standards for automobiles, for improved efficiency of automobiles, for the longest time. And honestly, when you think about it, what if General Motors had said, darn it, we're just not going to build to meet code. We're going to design vehicles that are more energy efficient, that are beautiful and fast and comfortable. We can do this, and we're going to do it. And we're going to do it better than anybody in the world. Because we know with the wisdom that ultimately, fuel's running out, it's going to get more expensive, all these different things, right? There's going to be pressures on us. The trends are as obvious as the nose on your face. And they could have said, let's start designing more efficiently. Let's see where we could go with this enterprise. Maybe we wouldn't have had to bail them out. You think of these things. We identify driven by federal legislation and executive orders, because unfortunately lots of people won't do things unless they feel they're supposed to. If you have to do it, then you do it. And that's important. Codes are critically important. So we look at that and we see that I'm pushing the wrong button. That's why it's not moving. There we go. We look at it and we see legislation and executive orders that have affected energy policy over time. And certainly after the Arab oil embargo in 1975, Gerald Ford came up with the Energy Policy and Conservation Act, which required standards to be created. The Federal Energy Management Program was created to focus on energy consumption in federal buildings, one of the biggest users, and also one of the users that can lead by example. Then secondly, 1976, Gerald Ford also put into place the BEPS, Building Energy Performance Standards, and codes. We started to move out from this situation, this trend, this shock to the system, and say, okay, let's go out various levels and identify what it is that we can do. We need to create standards. We need building energy performance standards and codes. Unfortunately, there was a bit of time between the 78 National Energy Policy and 1992, but the Energy Policy Act, states must establish codes. And then we move along to 2005. Now, build buildings that are 30% better than code. So we see these steps and how federal legislation and executive orders have driven certain elements of this. Critical, absolutely critical. Energy codes and standards. Well, what's the difference? Energy codes define how buildings must be built. That's the prescriptive code. Got to be an R13 wall system, whatever. Must perform. They identify how buildings must perform. I want you to achieve a certain EUI. I want you to achieve 100 kBTU per square foot per year, total energy consumption. Meet that proscriptive or performance-based standard. Codes are written in mandatory and enforceable language, adopted and enforced by local jurisdictions. Model codes produced by the ICC, the International Code Council, and you may find energy standards being referred to as the basis of codes. Now, what about standards? They define how buildings should be built or should perform, and those would be prescriptive or performance-based. They are not written in mandatory and enforceable language, generally, though they can be mandatory if in the code it refers to, say, in the IECC 2009, if it refers to the 90.1 ASHRAE standard, then guess what? It's mandatory. Thou shalt build to that particular level. Standards are published by national technical organizations like ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. They affect all the elements of buildings, so if you could cut away a building and see the elements of it, you see it's ultimately the architectural elements, the mechanical elements, lighting, controls, water heating, all of those aspects. That's what it controls. Standard organizations and code organizations like ICC and ASHRAE we spoke about, also ANSI, the Building Energy Codes Program for the U.S. Department of Energy. There are really 4 areas that we'll focus on to cover the basis of most of the standards. The ASHRAE standard 90.1 is for commercial buildings. If you'll read the title, you'll see it's for buildings except low-rise residential buildings. Well, what's wrong with low-rise residential buildings? Well, we've got another standard for that. That's the 90.2. So we don't want anybody to get upset. We've got both of them covered. Thank you very much. And the IECC. And then there's the 10 Code of Federal Regulations, which basically says federal buildings need to be built to meet these other 3. So it's all quite logical. It's confusing as all get out in many respects. Which one do I have to cover? Which one's most important to me now? IECC 2009, ASHRAE 90.1, is it 2007, is it 2010? What about the 2012? What are we having for breakfast? There's many things that you sometimes know and sometimes don't know. But through some knowledge and wisdom that you're going to gain in here, you're going to know the answers to some of these questions. That's good.